The shuttle shuddered as it engaged the retro thrusters, a vibration that rattled Lewis's teeth, and the half-empty canister of water in his lap. Outside the reinforced glass viewport, the cosmos was not the empty, comforting black he had grown up mapping from the safety of his bedroom on Earth. Here, the void was alive. It was bleeding. Dominating the view was the Lumen Heart. It was a colossal swirling nebula of violet and bruised gold, a vortex of raw energy that defied standard physics. It pulsed like an exposed organ, casting a sickly, beautiful light over the metal carapace of the Evernight array. The space station orbited the anomaly, like a tick gorging on a host, a sprawling megastructure of spinning rings, docking spires, and industrial scaffolding stamped with the ubiquitous double helix logo of the Helix Dominion. Lewis adjusted his glasses, his fingers trembling slightly. He was 24 years old, though he felt 80. He looked down at the tablet in his hand, rereading the contract for the 100th time. Position: Senior Data Analyst, Energy Stability Division. Location: Evernight Array, Sector 7. Compensation: 4,000 credits monthly, plus housing allowance. The fine print was where the devil lived. Clause 89. Employee agrees to support reconstruction efforts for colonies affected by energy realignments. It was a polite way of saying he would be cleaning up the mathematical mess left behind after Helix drained a planet dry and moved on. It was corporate colonialism dressed up as humanitarian aid. He had signed it anyway. He had signed it because the alternative was staying on Earth in the silent house where his father now entertained Helix executives at dinner, shaking the hands of the men who had authorized the operation that killed Lewis's mother and sister. "We are now docking at Ring 1, the shuttle's automated voice announced. "Welcome to the Evernight Array. Helix Dominion building tomorrow today." Lewis grabbed his duffel bag, a battered canvas thing that looked woefully out of place against the sleek polymers of the shuttle interior, and stood up. He was tall, but slouched, a posture born of years spent hunching over holographic models. He wore a gray jumper that was 2 sizes too big, trying to make himself disappear. He did not want to be here, but he could not be there either. He was a man suspended in the void, a self-imposed exile drifting toward the most dangerous object in the galaxy. The Immigration Processing Center on Ring 1 was a cathedral of white marble and transparent aluminum designed to impress visitors and investors. But Lewis was neither. After his retinal scan cleared, he was directed not to the luxury lifts, but to a service elevator that smelled of ozone and recycled air. "Housing assignment update," a drone muttered as it hovered near his shoulder. "Due to an unexpected overflow in the staff quarters of Ring 5, your accommodation has been reallocated." Lewis frowned at the drone. "Reallocated. My contract specifies a Class B single cabin." "Class B availability is at 0%. The drone droned its voice, devoid of empathy. "You have been assigned to Ring 12 Sector B Cabin 12-4. Please proceed to the transport hub." Ring 12. Even back on Earth, reading the obscure forums on the extranet, Lewis had heard of Ring 12. The locals called it the Sink, or the Island of the Abandoned. It was the furthest ring from the central command spire, where gravity was simulated by spin, rather than expensive generators, making it feel slightly too heavy. The elevator ride down was a descent into a different world. The pristine white walls gave way to gray industrial plating, then to panels covered in graffiti, spray-painted in languages Lewis's universal translator struggled to parse. The air grew thicker, humid, and heavy, with a scent of frying oil, exotic spices, and wet fur. When the doors opened on Ring 12, the noise hit him like a physical wave. It was a marketplace, a slum, and a fortress rolled into one. Neon signs flickered in colors that hurt human eyes. The crowd was a dense river of biology. There were Lupians, wolf-like bipeds, towering over the crowd, their fur matted with grease from the salvage yards, moving with a limping grace that suggested old war wounds. There were nocturnes, pale, elegant vampires who had lost their dark homeworlds, now selling synthetic plasma shots from street carts. And everywhere, the logos of Helix were scratched out, vandalized, or covered with posters of missing persons. Lewis clutched his bag to his chest, navigating the crowd. He was the only human in sight who wasn't wearing a security uniform. Eyes followed him. Yellow eyes, red eyes, eyes with slit pupils. He felt like a lab mouse that had wandered into a wolf den. Cabin 12-4, he muttered to himself, checking the directions on his datapad. Just find the room, lock the door, and sleep for 12 hours. He found Sector B, down a narrow corridor, where the pipes leaked steam, and the floor was sticky. The door to 12-4 was standard-issue gray metal, with a keypad that looked like it had been punched by a fist. He keyed in his code. The light turned green. Finally, Lewis sighed, imagining a small, quiet box where he could be alone. He palmed the door open and stepped inside. He did not find silence. He found chaos. The room was filled with steam. It smelled of lavender soap and hot iron. It was not a single cabin. It was a barracks, cramped and cluttered with unfamiliar gear. And it was occupied. Lewis froze. Standing in the center of the room, illuminated by the harsh bathroom light, was a tall, humanoid figure. She had skin the color of polished obsidian, covered in fine, velvety fur. Her ears, triangular and tufted, twitched atop a head of wild silver hair. A long, sinuous tail lashed behind her. She was currently in the process of unbuckling a heavy composite chestplate. She was a Nakari, a cat person in the crude parlance of Earth, but there was nothing house cat about her. She was pure predator. Behind her, sitting on a top bunk, was another Nakari with golden fur meticulously cleaning a sniper rifle that was disassembled on the blanket. And hanging upside down from the rafters, typing furiously on a holographic keyboard, was a third one, smaller, with calico markings. Lewis's brain short-circuited. He had walked into a communal changing room, or a nest, or a secret base. "Oh, God," Lewis squeaked. I didn't." The obsidian Nakari turned. Her eyes were green fire. She saw a human male staring. "Pervert," the calico one from the ceiling shrieked. "Intruder," the one with the rifle shouted. "Helix spy," the obsidian one snarled. Before Lewis could articulate the sentence, "I have a housing assignment," the obsidian Nakari launched herself across the room. She moved with a speed that blurred the air. Lewis barely had time to raise his hands before 60 kilograms of muscle and fury slammed into him. They hit the floor hard. The air left Lewis's lungs in a wheezing gasp. He was pinned his back against the cold metal plating, a forearm pressed against his throat. A set of very sharp, very white canines was bared inches from his nose. "Give me one reason not to rip your throat out, smooth skin," the Nakari hissed. Her ears were flattened against her skull. "Naira, wait, check his teeth," the golden one said, hopping down from the bunk. She didn't look angry, just clinically curious. She was holding a syringe. "If he has a venom sac, he is a shapeshifter. If not, I have a sedative that works on humans. Usually." Lewis choked his face, turning red. "He's got a camera." The calico one dropped from the ceiling, landing silently next to Lewis's head. She was holding a laser soldering pen and pointed it directly at his eye. "I bet he is live streaming to security. Should I blind him, Naira? Just a little bit." "No blinding yet, Kiri," Naira growled, increasing the pressure on Lewis's windpipe. "Who sent you? Is it the sector warden? Did we miss a payment?" "Housing," Lewis managed to wheeze. "Housing assignment," Naira blinked. The pressure eased by a fraction of a millimeter. "What?" Lewis flailed a hand toward his fallen datapad. "Transfer, I live here." Naira looked at Kiri. "Check it." Kiri snatched the datapad, her movements twitchy and fast. She tapped the screen with a clawed finger. "System says Lewis Thorne, human. Assigned to Unit B-12-4, effective 1400 hours today." She looked up, her large eyes wide. "By the great hunter Naira. He is telling the truth. The system put a human in our den." Naira stared down at Lewis. The rage in her eyes cooled to confusion, then transformed into a profound annoyance. She released his throat and stood up, smoothing down her fur. "System error," Naira spat. "Has to be." Lewis scrambled backward until he hit the doorframe, gasping for air, rubbing his neck. "I requested a single," he coughed. "There was a mistake." "You are damn right there was a mistake," Naira said, crossing her arms. She was wearing only loose cargo pants and a tank top now, her muscles defined and tense. "This is a Nakari unit. We do not room with humans, especially not male humans who barge in without knocking." "I keyed the code," Lewis defended himself, his voice cracking. "The light turned green. I thought it was empty." Lonnie, the golden-furred one, stepped forward. She put the syringe away, much to Lewis's relief. "Heart rate is 140, she noted, looking at Lewis with a tilt of her head. "He is terrified. I do not think he is a spy, Naira. Spies usually have better cardiovascular control." "I am an engineer," Lewis said, adjusting his crooked glasses. "I fix data streams. I don't spy." Naira glared at him for a long moment, sniffing the air. "He smells like fear and stale recycled water." "Fine." She turned to her sisters. "He stays until we can get him evicted. But we need rules." She spun back to Lewis, pointing a clawed finger at his chest. "Rule 1, she barked. "This is my side of the room. That is your corner. Do not cross the line unless the room is on fire." Lewis looked at the corner she indicated. It was a small space next to the ventilation duct, currently occupied by a pile of spare droid parts. "Rule 2, Kiri piped up, grinning and showing sharp teeth. "No touching the tails. You touch the tail, you lose a finger. It is a fair trade." "Rule 3, Lonnie added gently. "If you are sick, tell me immediately. Humans carry bacteria that make my fur itch." "And the most important rule," Nira lowered her voice, leaning in. "You see nothing. You hear nothing. What happens in Block 12 stays in Block 12. You report anything to Helix, any irregularities, any unapproved tech, any meetings, and you won't wake up." "Are we clear?" Lewis nodded vigorously. "Crystal, clear. I just want to sleep and maybe work. That is it." "Good," Naira huffed. She kicked the pile of droid parts toward the wall. "Welcome home, roommate." An hour later, the adrenaline had faded into a dull throb in Lewis's skull. The sisters had returned to their routines, ignoring him with aggressive indifference. Lewis unpacked in silence. His corner was small, but he had lived in smaller spaces. He set up his portable workstation, a humble deck of screens and processors. Then he reached into the bottom of his duffel bag and pulled out a black cylindrical tube. He handled it with reverence, as if it were made of glass. He popped the cap and slid out a sheet of synthetic parchment. It was a map. Not a digital projection, but a hand-drawn map of the star sector. The ink was faded in places, the edges worn soft. His mother had drawn the grid lines. His sister Alara had drawn the stars. Lewis found a roll of adhesive tape and carefully stuck the map to the metal wall above his narrow bunk. He took a small box of pins from his pocket. Red pins for the dead worlds. Green pins for the safe ones. He picked up a red pin. He hesitated, his hand hovering over a system named Ethelgard. It had been a forest planet home to a colony of pacifist wolfkin. Helix had arrived 5 years ago to harvest the geothermal core. Now it was a cracked rock floating in space. He pushed the red pin in. Then his eyes moved to a system called Oryx 4. That was where his mother and Alara had been stationed. A research outpost. They had been studying the local energy flora. Helix had decided to test a new extraction protocol. The atmosphere had ignited. He pushed another red pin into the paper. It went in deep, bending slightly. "What is that?" Lewis jumped. Kiri was hanging off the side of her bunk, watching him. Her tail swayed lazily, like a pendulum. "It is a map," Lewis said quietly. "It is old," Kiri observed. "Those coordinates for the Nocturne homeworld are wrong. The drift has moved it by 2 parsecs. "It is from before," Lewis said. "Before the drift." Nira, who was doing one-armed push-ups on the floor, paused mid-rep. She looked up at the map. She saw the red pins. She saw the cluster of red pins around the Nakari sector. She didn't say anything. She just watched him for a second, her expression unreadable, and then resumed her push-ups. 102, she counted, her voice tight. 103. The hostility in the room didn't vanish, but the texture of it changed. It was less sharp. Lewis sat on his thin mattress, hugging his knees. He wasn't just a Helix employee to them anymore. He was a guy with a map full of graveyards. Night on the Evernight Array was a theoretical concept. The station lights dimmed to a twilight amber, simulating a planetary evening. Lewis lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling panel directly above his head. It was flickering. A rhythmic, irritating strobe effect. Buzz-click, buzz-click. He tossed and turned. The snores from the Lupian in the next cabin vibrated through the wall. Nira was breathing deeply, a soft, rumbling sound like a distant engine. Lewis couldn't take it. He sat up, reached into his tool belt, hanging on the bedpost, and pulled out a multi-driver. He stood on his mattress, balancing precariously, and unscrewed the panel. "Wiring is shot," he whispered to himself. "Impedance mismatch on the tertiary coil." He reached in. Most engineers would just bypass the fuse. But Lewis didn't think in bypasses. He thought in flow. He could see the energy in his mind, a stream of electrons, trying to find the path of least resistance. He closed his eyes. He didn't just fix the wire. He visualized the frequency of the station's main reactor. He hummed a low note, a D-flat matching the resonance of the current. His fingers moved blindly, twisting the microcables into a new configuration, a spiral pattern he had developed in his thesis, the same thesis his father had called theoretical garbage. Stabilize the wave, he thought. Harmonize the input. As he twisted the final connection, a spark jumped from the wire to his fingertip. It didn't hurt. It felt cold like ice water. For a second, just one heartbeat, Lewis felt the ceiling vanish. He felt the metal hull of the station dissolve. He felt the vast, crushing weight of the lumen heart outside. It wasn't just a nebula. It was a voice. A chaotic, screaming, singing voice. Lost hungry, where the sensation snapped. Lewis gasped, nearly falling off the bed. The light fixture above him flared bright, pure white, then settled into a steady, warm glow. It was perfect. No flicker. No buzz. It was the cleanest light in the entire sector. Lewis stared at his hands. They were shaking. Outside, in the vacuum of space, the lumen heart pulsed. A single, massive ripple of violet light expanded from its core, washing over Ring 12. In the cabin, Nira stirred in her sleep. Her ears twitched. Lewis quickly screwed the panel back on and shoved his multi-driver under his pillow. He lay down, pulling the scratchy blanket up to his chin. He felt drained, as if he had run 10 kilometers. But the light was steady. He closed his eyes, unaware that he had just knocked on a door that should have been locked. Far above the grime of Ring 12 and the command spire of the Helix Dominion, the air smelled of filtered lavender and expensive synthetic leather. Director Cale Draven stood by a wall of floor-to-ceiling glass, looking out at the lumen heart. He was a nocturne, tall and gaunt, with skin like alabaster and hair as black as a gravity well. He swirled a glass of crimson liquid, a vintage blood wine from a vineyard that no longer existed. "Report," Kyle said softly. His voice was silk, wrapped around a razor blade. "Anomaly detected," the station AI responded. "Sector 12. A micro-surge in the energy grid. Duration 3 seconds. It coincided with a 0.04% expansion of the lumen heart's corona. Source: localized to Block 12, Cabin B-12-4. Cale turned away from the window. He walked to his desk, a slab of floating obsidian, and tapped a holographic interface. A personnel file rotated in the air. Lewis Thorne, human, age 24. Cale's pale finger traced the air, scrolling down to the family history section. Mother Doctor Elena Thorne, deceased. Incident report. Oryx 4 containment failure. Father Arthur Thorne, senior consultant, Helix Strategy. Cale paused. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face, revealing elongated canines that were far sharper than Nira's. Elena's boy, he mused. The apple does not fall far from the burning tree. He looked at the energy readings again. The surge in cabin 12-4 had a signature. It wasn't just a power spike. It was a harmonic frequency. It was a language. Monitor him, Cale ordered. Do not interfere yet. Let him settle in. Let him make friends with the strays down there. He took a sip of his wine, savoring the iron tang. Block 12 just acquired a very interesting refugee, Cale whispered to the empty room. Welcome to the machine, Mr. Thorne. Living with 3 Nakari sisters required a fundamental rewiring of Lewis's survival instincts. It was not unlike living inside a complex, hairy, and occasionally explosive clockwork mechanism. Adaptation came in small, painful lessons. Lesson 1. Gravity was a suggestion, not a law for Kiri. At 6 o'clock in the morning, Lewis stumbled out of his bunk, his eyes bleary, and his mind still half stuck in a dream about energy matrices. He reached for his glasses on the small shelf he had installed in his designated corner. Before his fingers could graze the metal frames, a blur of calico fur dropped from the ceiling vent. "Heads up, human!" Kiri chirped. Lewis ducked instinctively. Kiri's tail, a long, striped appendage that seemed to have a mind of its own, whipped through the space where his nose had been a second before. She landed on the floor in a crouch, barely making a sound, and immediately began typing on a holographic interface that projected from her wrist gauntlet. "You are slow today," Kiri noted without looking up. "My predictive algorithm says you have a 40% chance of tripping over your own boots." "It is 6 in the morning, Kiri," Lewis groaned, finding his glasses and shoving them onto his face. "Humans obey gravity. We do not drop from vents." "Boring," she dismissed him, bounding up to the top bunk in a single leap. Lesson 2. Never ask what is in the bowl. Lewis shuffled to the small communal table in the center of the cabin. Lonnie, the golden-furred sister, and the group's medic was stirring a pot of something gray and viscous on the hot plate. It smelled faintly of iron and burnt rosemary. "Eat," Lonnie commanded, sliding a bowl in front of him. Lewis stared at the sludge. "What is it today, Lonnie?" "It looks like industrial sealant." "It is nutrient mash enriched with synthetic marrow and calcium," Lonnie explained, her voice clinically detached. "It is excellent for fur luster and claw density." "I do not have fur or claws," Lewis pointed out, picking up his spoon with trepidation. "It is also good for human nerve conductivity," Lonnie countered, her ears twitching with impatience. "You look pale. Your species is fragile. You break easily. Eat." Lewis ate. It tasted like wet cardboard mixed with battery acid. But he ate it because Lonnie was watching him with unblinking yellow eyes, and because despite the taste, it was warm. It was the first time in 3 years that someone had cared whether he ate breakfast or just subsisted on caffeine stims. Lesson 3. The hallway is a dojo. Lewis finished his mash, grabbed his datapad, and opened the cabin door to leave for his shift. He was immediately slammed back against the doorframe by a gust of wind. Naira, the obsidian-furred eldest sister, was mid-spin kick. Her shin stopped 2 inches from Lewis's face. She held the pose, her breathing steady sweat glistening on her dark fur. "You are in my line of fire, Lewis," she said, her voice a low rumble. "I am trying to go to work," Lewis squeaked, pressing himself flat against the metal. Nira lowered her legs slowly. She looked him up and down, adjusting the straps of her hand wraps. "You walk too loudly. A deaf Lupian could track you. Step on the balls of your feet, not the heels." "I am a data analyst, Naira. I do not need to sneak up on spreadsheets." Naira snorted a sharp exhalation of air. She reached out and straightened his collar, a gesture that was rough but surprisingly intimate. On this station, everyone is hunting something, Lewis. Even the spreadsheets. Move. She stepped aside, allowing him to pass. As he hurried down the corridor, he felt her eyes on his back, assessing him, protecting him. Block 12 was waking up. The corridor smelled of ozone, frying oil, and damp fur. It was a sensory assault, a chaotic tapestry of life, clinging to the edge of the void. And yet, for the first time since leaving Earth, Lewis did not feel the urge to hide. The commute to the lift station was a tour through the wreckage of a dozen civilizations. Helix Dominion liked to call Evernight Array a cosmic melting pot. In reality, it was a refugee camp built of steel and sorrow. Lewis navigated the crowd, clutching his bag. He passed a pair of Lupians, massive wolf-like bipeds, standing over 2 meters tall. They wore tattered flight suits with the patches ripped off. One of them, a scarred male named Varg, with missing fur on his left shoulder, was working as a bouncer for a noodle stall. He had once been a pack leader on a forest world called Silveris. Now he guarded bowls of synthetic broth for 5 credits an hour. Further down, the lighting dimmed. This was the sector, dominated by the Nocturnes. Pale, elegant vampires who had lost their sunless citadels to Helix's solar harvesting arrays. A woman, with hair like spun moonlight, sat on a crate tuning a lute that made no sound. She was singing a frequency only her kind could hear, her face wet with red tears. Lewis stopped at a water station to fill his canteen. The readout on the dispenser flashed current rate 7 credits per liter. Surge pricing in effect due to maintenance costs. 7 credits, Lewis muttered. It was 5 yesterday. Maintenance costs, a gravelly voice said behind him. Lewis turned. It was Silas, an old Lupian with gray fur and clouded eyes. He was leaning on a cane made from a piece of recycled pipe. They say the filtration unit in Ring 12 is failing, Silas rumbled, staring at the machine with disdain. Funny how the filtration units in the officers' ring never fail. It is a pressure tactic, Lewis said the words, slipping out before he could stop them. They squeeze the water budget to force more residents to sign up for the labor contracts on the mining moons. Silas looked at Lewis, his ears perking up. Humans were rare in Block 12, and usually they were Helix spies or desperate addicts. Lewis, with his oversized jumper and nervous hands, was an anomaly. You are the human living with the Nakari sisters, Silas stated. It wasn't a question. Yes, Lewis said. I am Lewis. They have not eaten you yet, Silas observed, a hint of amusement, baring his yellowed canines. That speaks well of you. Or perhaps you just taste bad. Lonnie says I lack sufficient muscle mass to be a viable meal, Lewis quipped. Silas laughed, a sound like grinding stones. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small dried root. He handed it to Lewis. Chew this. It helps with the nerves. You smell like anxiety, boy. Lewis took the root. Thank you. We are all strays here, Silas said, tapping his cane on the deck. Even the 2-legged ones without fur. Watch your back, Lewis. Lewis walked away, chewing the bitter root. It tasted of earth, real earth, not hydroponic gel. He realized then that Block 12 was not just a place where people lived. It was a place where people remembered. Every scar on Varg's shoulder was a story. Every song the Nocturne woman sang was a history book. And Helix was trying to edit them all out of existence. The work was the only thing that made sense. Lewis sat in the Energy Stability Division, a sterile, white-walled room in Ring 4 that felt a universe away from the grime of Block 12. The air here was filtered to a crisp, tasteless neutrality. His job was to watch the lumen heart. On his monitors, the anomaly was a breathtaking cascade of variables. He saw the energy flow as a symphony of numbers. Most engineers looked for spikes. Lewis looked for rhythm. Thorne, a supervisor, barked, walking past his station. Production quotas are down 2%. Adjust the intake valves on Sector 9. If we widen the intake, the harmonic resonance will destabilize, Lewis said, without looking away from his screen. The heart is agitated today. I am reading microtremors in the containment field. The heart is a battery, Thorn. It does not get agitated, the supervisor sneered. Just open the valves. We have a shipment schedule to meet. Lewis hesitated. He looked at the data. The lumen heart was pulsing with a jagged, irregular beat. It reminded him of a trapped animal pacing in a cage. He typed in the command to open the valves, but his fingers hovered over the execute key. He couldn't do it. The math screamed at him that it was wrong. Suddenly, the alarms blared. Warning. Gravitational shear detected. Sector 12. Lewis's heart stopped. Sector 12. Block 12. On the main view screen, a schematic of the station appeared. A massive tendril of energy had lashed out from the lumen heart, striking the lower rings. The impact had knocked a residential module loose from its magnetic moorings. Module B12 Alpha is drifting, a technician shouted. Structure integrity failing. Cut the power to that sector, the supervisor ordered. Seal the bulkheads. We cannot let the feedback reach the extraction core. There are people in there? Lewis stood up his chair, clattering to the floor. That is a family unit. If you cut the power, their life support fails in 3 minutes. It is acceptable collateral to save the core, the supervisor said coldly. Do it. No, Lewis said. He sat back down. His hands flew across his keyboard. He wasn't unauthorized to access the magnetic tethers, but he knew the backdoor code. Curie had showed him a vulnerability in the Helix firewall, just to prove she could find it. Thorn, what are you doing? The supervisor shouted. I am rerouting the energy from the extraction core back into the magnetic stabilizers. Lewis said, his voice trembling, but his hands steady. I am creating a counterwave. You will blow the fuses. I will balance it, Lewis yelled back. He closed his eyes for a second, visualizing the wave. He needed to be perfect. He needed to match the chaotic rhythm of the lumen heart and invert it. He tapped the final key. The lights in the control room flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Emergency red lighting bathed the room. The floor shuddered violently, then silence. Module B12. Alpha has stabilized, the technician's voice whispered in the gloom. Drift arrested. Magnetic lock re-engaged. Lewis slumped in his chair, sweat dripping down his nose. He had saved them. He had saved the module. The supervisor loomed over him, his face a mask of fury illuminated by the red emergency lights. You disobeyed a direct order, Thorn. You diverted energy worth 50,000 credits to save a slum module. I saved 40 lives, Lewis said, looking the man in the eye. You are on probation, the supervisor hissed. One more stunt like that and you will be on the next shuttle out, without a spacesuit. Lewis didn't care. He looked at the screen where the green dot of the module blinked steadily. He had done something his mother would have done. Word traveled faster than light in Block 12. When Lewis returned that evening, the atmosphere had shifted. The usual wary glances were gone. As he walked past the noodle stall, Varg, the massive Lupian bouncer, stepped into his path. Lewis flinched, expecting a shakedown. Varg looked down at him, his shadow engulfing Lewis. Then slowly, the wolfman placed a heavy clawed hand on Lewis's shoulder. He didn't squeeze. My sister's pups were in Module Alpha, Varg rumbled. His voice was deep, vibrating in Lewis's chest. I just did the math, Lewis stammered. You did more than math, little human, Varg said. He reached behind him and grabbed a bowl of steaming broth from the stall. He shoved it into Lewis's hands. Eat. On the house, Lewis took the bowl. Thank you. He walked the rest of the way to the cabin with the warm bowl in his hands. People nodded at him. The nocturne singer paused her song and dipped her head. He wasn't just the human pet of the Nakari sisters anymore. He was the human who had chosen the block over the company. When he entered the cabin, the three sisters were waiting. Naira was sitting on his bunk, right under his star map. She didn't look angry. She looked impressed, and perhaps a little concerned. "You have a death wish," Naira said, though there was no heat in her voice. "Redirecting core power helix executes people for less." "I couldn't let them drift," Lewis said, setting the noodle bowl down. "I just felt the wave. I knew I could catch it." "You are an idiot," Kiri said from the ceiling, but she dropped a chocolate bar onto his head. It was real chocolate, not synthetic. A rare treasure. "Good job, idiot." Lonnie was checking his pupils with a penlight. "Adrenaline levels are still high, but you are intact. Come sit. We need to talk." They sat on the floor, in a circle, a ritual they usually excluded him from. Tonight, they made space. "We heard what happened," Naira said quietly. "The supervisors wanted to cut the line. You stopped them." "They called it collateral," Lewis said bitterly. "Just numbers." "That is all we are to them," Naira said. Her gaze drifted to the window, to the swirling purple light of the lumen heart outside. "When Helix came to my world, to the star forests of Nakar, they said the same thing. They said our trees were inefficient energy absorbers. They burned the forest to clear the way for their collectors." Lewis looked at her. He saw the pain etched into the sharp angles of her face. "My mother," he whispered. "She died on Oryx 4. Helix was testing a new extraction method. They overloaded the planetary core. They called it an unforeseen geological event. But I saw the data. They knew the risks. They just didn't care." Naira turned to him. Her green eyes locked with his. At that moment, the species barrier evaporated. They were just two children standing in the ashes of their homes. "We are the same," Naira said softly. She reached out and for the first time touched his hand without aggression. Her paw was warm, the pads rough, but gentle. "We are both ghosts, Lewis." Lewis didn't pull away. He laced his fingers through hers. "Ghosts can still haunt the house," he said. Naira smiled, a small, sad thing that transformed her face. "Yes, we can." From the shadows of the top bunk, Kiri watched them, her eyes narrowing. She wasn't looking at their hands. She was looking at a datapad in her lap. On the screen, a graph was scrolling. It showed Lewis's brainwave patterns from earlier that day, overlaid with the fluctuation data of the lumen heart. The lines matched perfectly. "Lonnie," Kiri whispered, tapping her sister's arm. "Look at this." Lonnie leaned in her ears, swiveling. She studied the data. "Impossible. A human brain cannot synchronize with a stellar anomaly. The psychic pressure would liquefy his cortex." "He is not liquefying," Kiri whispered back. "He is resonating. When he thinks about the lost worlds, the heart answers." Lonnie looked at Lewis, who was still holding Naira's hand, talking about star maps. "The heart remembers," Lonnie murmured, "and somehow it remembers him." 3 days later, the summons came. It wasn't a digital message. It was a person. A pristine, chrome-plated droid floated up to Lewis while he was eating lunch in the canteen. "Mr. Lewis Thorne," the droid chimed. "Director Cale Draven requests your presence for a performance review. Immediately." The canteen went silent. Varg stopped chewing his bone. Naira, who was sitting next to Lewis, stiffened her hand, dropping to the concealed knife in her boot. "It is okay," Lewis said, standing up. His legs felt like jelly, but he forced himself to smile. "Just a review. Probably about the power diversion." "Do not sign anything," Naira hissed. "And do not drink anything." Lewis followed the droid to the upper rings. The ascent was a journey through the class strata of the station. The gray steel turned to white polymer, then to plush carpet and real wood paneling. Director Cale's office was a sanctuary of wealth. The walls were lined with books, real paper books. A classical symphony played softly in the background. The view of the lumen heart was unobstructed, framing the anomaly like a piece of art. Cale Draven sat behind a desk made of black glass. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a statesman. Mr. Thorne, Cale, said, his voice smooth and cultured. Please sit. Would you like some coffee? It is Arabica beans grown in the hydroponic gardens of Ring 1. Water is fine, Lewis said, remembering Naira's warning. He didn't sit. Cale smiled, revealing the tips of his fangs. A man of caution. I admire that. He tapped the desk, and a holographic display appeared. It showed Lewis's personnel file alongside the data from the incident 3 days ago. You have a unique talent, Lewis, Cale said. Most of my engineers see the Lumen Heart as a resource to be mined. You see it as what an instrument to be played. I see it as dangerous, Lewis said. You are pushing it too hard, Director. The fluctuations are increasing. If you keep expanding the extraction field, the station's orbit will decay. Progress always carries risk. Cale dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. But let us talk about you. You are living in a slum rooming with non-humans, eating processed sludge. A man of your intellect deserves better. Cale stood up and walked around the desk. He leaned against it, crossing his arms. I know about your mother, Lewis, Elena. She was a brilliant woman, stubborn, but brilliant. Lewis clenched his fists. Don't talk about her. She died because she lacked vision, Cale said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper. She wanted to save a rock. I wanted to save the future. But her death was regrettable. A waste. He looked at Lewis intently. I can offer you a way out, Lewis. I can wipe your debt. I can grant you citizenship status, a penthouse in Ring 1, access to the deep archives. All you have to do is help me. Help you do what? Lewis asked, his throat dry. We are preparing to expand the network, Cale said. New colonies, new extraction sites. But the locals, they can be difficult. We need someone who understands the energy signatures of these worlds. Someone who can predict how the heart will react when we integrate them. Lewis felt cold. Cale wasn't asking him to fix a machine. He was asking him to target the weapon. You want me to help you find the next Oryx 4, Lewis said. The next Nakar. I want you to help me bring order to the chaos, Cale corrected. Think about it. You can be a savior, Lewis. Or you can be a casualty just like your mother. The choice is yours. Cale reached out and brushed a piece of lint from Lewis's shoulder. Take 24 hours. But remember, the view from Block 12 is very limited, and accidents happen there all the time. Lewis didn't take the lift back to Block 12. He walked down the service stairs 20 flights of metal steps, trying to burn the anger out of his blood. When he finally reached cabin B-12-4, he was drenched in sweat and shaking. The room was dark. The sisters were there waiting. He offered me a job, Lewis said, his voice breaking. He didn't look at them. He looked at the map on the wall at the red pins. He wants me to help him target new worlds. Nira stood up from the darkness. And what did you say? I wanted to punch him, Lewis said. I wanted to kill him. But you didn't, Kiri said from the corner. No, Lewis admitted. Because he is right about one thing. He has the power, and I have nothing. You are wrong, Lonnie said. She stepped forward and pressed a button on the wall. The panel slid open, revealing a hidden compartment Lewis had never noticed. Inside was a cache of weapons, encrypted drives, and strange organic-looking tech. Nira walked over to Lewis. She placed her hands on his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. You think we are just refugees, Lewis. You think we just sit here and lick our wounds. Lewis stammered. We are not just survivors, Nira said fiercely. We are the resistance. Block 12 isn't a slum. It is a fortress. Kiri jumped down, holding her datapad. She turned it around to show Lewis the graph of his brainwaves, matching the heart. And you, Kiri, grinned, her teeth sharp in the gloom, are the key we have been waiting for. You are not just a nerd, Lewis. You are a whisperer. The heart talks to you. Lewis looked at the data. He looked at the weapons. He looked at the three sisters who had taken him in, when the universe had spat him out. He realized then that Cale had made a mistake. He had tried to buy Lewis with comfort. But Lewis didn't want comfort. He wanted revenge. And more than that, he wanted to protect the family standing in front of him. Lewis reached up and took the pin out of Oryx 4 on his map. He held it in his hand, the sharp point digging into his palm. "Show me," Lewis said. "Show me how we fight him." Naira smiled. It was a dangerous, beautiful smile. "Welcome to the pack, Lewis," she said. The lights in the cabin flickered, not from a fault, but because outside, the lumen heart pulsed a deep, resonant violet, as if acknowledging the declaration of war. The hidden compartment in cabin B-12-4 smelled of ozone and old hope. It was cramped, lit only by the holographic glow of Kiri's stolen server node. Lewis sat cross-legged on the floor, his knees touching Nira's. Lonnie was adjusting a metallic headset that looked like a crown of thorns, made from copper wire and fiber optics. "This is the neural bridge," Lonnie explained, her voice steady, but her ears flattened with worry. "It translates bioelectric signals into energy frequencies. If Kiri is right, and your brain is already syncing with the lumen heart, this will amplify the connection." "And if Kiri is wrong?" Lewis asked, eyeing the device. "Then your brain will likely boil inside your skull," Lonnie said, matter-of-factly. "Comforting," Lewis muttered. "We do not have time for comfort," Nira said, sharpening her combat knife on a whetstone. The rhythmic sh-sh sound was the heartbeat of the room. "Kiri, show him the intercept." Kiri tapped a key. A projection flickered into life. It was a Helix internal memo, stamped with Director Cale Draven's digital signature. Project Absolute Horizon. Objective Maximum Extraction Efficiency. Contingency. In the event of containment failure, jettison external rings. Priority Preservation Command Spire and Extraction Core. Rings 11 through 15, designated as acceptable loss zones. "Acceptable loss zones," Lewis whispered. "That is us. That is Block 12. "And it gets worse," Kiri said, her tail lashing angrily. She pulled up another file. "They are not just planning to dump us into space. They have a recruitment drive scheduled for next week. Relocation to New Colony Beta. Beta is a mining rock with high radiation. They need bodies to dig the shafts before the machines arrive. It is a death camp." Lewis felt a cold fury settling in his stomach. It wasn't the frantic panic he used to feel. It was something heavier, solid. "We need to stop the extraction," Lewis said. "If the heart overloads, they will cut the rings loose." "We cannot stop it from the outside," Naira said. "The controls are hardwired in the central hub. We need to get you in there. You talk to the heart. You tell it to calm down. Or fight back." Lonnie placed the headset on Lewis's head. It felt cold against his temples. "We are going to do a test run, just a ping. Close your eyes, Lewis. Listen to the static." Lewis closed his eyes. At first, there was only the hum of the station's ventilation. Then slowly, a sound crept in. It wasn't a sound, really. It was a vibration in his teeth, a pressure behind his eyes. Cold weight broken. The sensation expanded. Suddenly, Lewis wasn't in the cabin anymore. He was floating in a forest of crystal trees that chimed in the wind, the Nakari homeworld. Then, he was running through a valley of obsidian shards, under a black sun, the Nocturne lands. He was standing in a high-tech lab, watching a woman with his eyes scream as fire consumed the air, Oryx 4. "Mother!" Lewis gasped. The vision sharpened. He saw his mother, Dr. Elena Thorne, not as a victim, but as a warrior. She was at a console, frantically typing code, trying to initiate a shutdown sequence, while the world burned around her. She wasn't running. She was fighting. "They are forcing it." Her voice echoed in the void, a memory preserved in pure energy. "They are hurting it. We have to." Lewis snapped his eyes open. He gasped for air, tearing the headset off. Sweat dripped from his nose. "Lewis," Naira's hand was on his shoulder instantly. "What did you see?" Everything, Lewis panted. The heart is not just energy. It is a graveyard. It absorbed the memories of everyone who died when Helix drained their worlds. My mother is there, or the echo of her is. He looked at Naira, his eyes wide. My family didn't just die in an accident, Naira. They were trying to stop the extraction. They were the first resistance. Naira's expression softened a mixture of grief and pride. Then you have a legacy to uphold. Suddenly, the cabin lights turned red. A siren wailed a low mechanical moan that vibrated the floor plates. Attention, the automated voice of the station announced. Security audit in progress. All residents of Sector 12 remain in your quarters. Non-compliance will be met with pacification. They are here, Kiri hissed, checking the monitors. Kale moved up the timeline. Troop transports are docking at the main airlock of Ring 12. Naira stood up, sliding her knife into its sheath. She grabbed a pulse rifle from the rack and tossed a stun baton to Lewis. Time for the test run is over, Naira said. Block 12 is about to become a war zone. Lewis, stay behind me. Lonnie, you have the portable bridge. Packed, Lonnie said, slinging a medic bag over her shoulder. Kiri, open the doors, Naira commanded. Which doors? Kiri asked, grinning. All of them. The corridors of Block 12 were chaos. Helix soldiers, mercenaries in matte black armor, were advancing in a phalanx formation. They were Lupians, mostly traitors to their own kind, bought with debt forgiveness and better rations. They held heavy shock shields and stun lances. But the residents were not cowering. Lewis saw Varg the bouncer flip a noodle cart to create a barricade. Behind it, a group of young wolfkin were throwing improvised smoke grenades made from engine coolant. The nocturne singer from the bar was perched on a ventilation pipe, using a sonic amplifier to blast a frequency that shattered the visors of the advancing troops. Hold the line, Varg roared, swinging a metal pipe. They are fighting, Lewis shouted, over the noise of stun bolts sizzling through the air. They are actually fighting. They have nothing left to lose, Naira shouted back. She moved like liquid shadow, dodging a stun bolt and sweeping the legs of a mercenary. Move! We need to get to the service lift. They sprinted through the mayhem. Lewis wasn't a soldier. He tripped. He stumbled. He flinched at every explosion. But he kept moving. He saw a mother shielding her child behind a dumpster. He saw an old vampire using his own body to block a door. This is it, Lewis thought. This is what Kale calls acceptable loss. A wave of anger, hot and righteous, washed over him. He gripped the stun baton tighter. He wasn't just a nerd anymore. He was a part of this messy, desperate, beautiful family. They reached the service lift, but the panel was fried. Kiri! Naira yelled. On it, Kiri slid under the sparks, her fingers flying across her gauntlet. 10 seconds! A squad of Helix soldiers turned the corner. Leading them was a massive Lupian in heavy enforcer armor. He didn't have a helmet on. It was Jarek. Lewis froze. He had seen Jarek around the block, a quiet, brooding figure who drank alone. He knew Jarek had been Naira's friend. But this wasn't the Jarek he knew. A metallic collar was clamped tight around the wolf's neck, pulsing with a sick green light. His eyes were glazed, devoid of recognition. Target identified, Jarek droned, his voice mechanical. Nakari unit, human sympathizer, terminate. Jarek, Naira screamed. It is me, Naira. Jarek didn't blink. He raised a heavy rotary cannon. He cannot hear you, Lonnie said, her scanner beeping. That collar is a neural override. Kale is driving him like a drone. The door is open, Kiri shouted as the lift doors groaned apart. Go, Naira shoved Lewis and Laney into the lift. I will hold him off. No, Lewis grabbed Naira's arm. You can't fight him alone. He is a tank. He is my friend, Naira said, her eyes wet but fierce. I have to try. Go to the hub. Stop the heart. If you don't, this whole fight means nothing. She pushed Lewis back. The doors began to close. Wait. Lewis jammed the stun baton into the gap, forcing the doors to retract. "We are not leaving you. We do this together, or we don't do it at all." Nira stared at him. She saw the stubborn set of his jaw, the same stubbornness his mother had when she defied a corporation. "Fine," Nira growled. "But do not die. It would look bad on my performance review." They stepped out of the lift to face Jarek. The corridor was narrow, lined with exposed conduits. The air was thick with smoke. Jarek charged. He moved with terrifying speed for his size. Nira met him, not with force, but with agility. She slid under his swing, kicking at his knee, but the armor absorbed the blow. Jarek backhanded her, sending her crashing into the wall. "Nira!" Lewis shouted. Jarek turned the rotary cannon toward Lewis. The barrel began to spin. Lewis didn't run. He looked at the collar on Jarek's neck. He looked at the conduits on the walls. And he felt the hum of the lumen heart vibrating through the station's hull. "Lonnie, the headset!" Lewis yelled. Lonnie threw him the neural bridge. Lewis jammed it onto his head. "Kiri, patch me into the station's gravity grid for this sector." "Are you crazy?" Kiri shrieked, dodging a piece of debris. "That will crush us." "Just do it, 5% fluctuation, now." Lewis closed his eyes. He reached out with his mind, not to the station, but through it to the heart outside. "Help us," he projected the thought. "Help him." The lumen heart roared in his mind. It was a cacophony of voices, but Lewis focused on the rhythm. He found the frequency of the gravity stabilizers in the corridor. "Now, Kiri!" Kiri slammed the command. Gravity in the corridor lurched. For a split second, up became sideways. Jarek mid-charge lost his footing. His heavy armor, designed for stability, became a liability. He crashed into the ceiling, then slammed back down to the floor as gravity normalized. It bought Nira enough time to recover. She leaped onto Jarek's back, trying to pry the collar off. "Jarek, wake up!" she screamed. Jarek roared, grabbing Nira by the vest and throwing her across the hall. He stood up, shaking his head. The green light on his collar pulsed faster. "Neural limit disengaged," Jarek's mechanical voice said. "Execute lethal force." He raised a vibroblade, aiming for Nira's chest. She was dazed on the floor, unable to move. "No," Lewis screamed. He didn't think so. He didn't calculate. He ran. He ran straight at Jarek. Not to tackle him, Lewis weighed 70 kilos soaking wet, but to touch him. He reached out and grabbed the power conduit on the wall with his left hand. Sparks flew, burning his palm. With his right hand, he lunged and grabbed the neural collar on Jarek's neck. "Lonnie, crank the headset to maximum," Lewis yelled. "It will fry your brain," Lonnie cried. "Do it!" Lonnie turned the dial. Lewis became a conduit. He channeled the raw, chaotic energy of the lumen heart, pulled from the void, through his own nervous system, and slammed it into the neural collar. White light blinded him. He felt every nerve ending in his body catch fire. He heard his mother's voice, Nira's voice, the screams of a dying world. "Break the chain." The collar on Jarek's neck exploded in a shower of sparks and plastic shards. Jarek convulsed, dropping the blade. He fell to his knees, gasping, his eyes rolling back in his head. The green light faded, replaced by the natural amber of his irises. Lewis was thrown backward by the feedback. He hit the opposite wall and slid down darkness, encroaching on the edges of his vision. He couldn't feel his hands. "Lewis." Nira was there instantly. She cradled his head in her lap. Her fur was matted with blood and dust. "You idiot," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You brave, stupid idiot." Lewis blinked. His vision was blurry. "Is he okay?" Jarek groaned, rubbing his neck. He looked at Nira, then at Lewis. "Nira, little human, why does my head feel like I drank a gallon of engine coolant?" "You are back," Nira said, a sob escaping her throat. "You are back." The station shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "The reunion is touching," Kiri said, her voice tight with panic. "But Kale just engaged the primary extraction protocol. The heart is destabilizing. If we do not get to the hub in 5 minutes, we are all going to be stardust. Lewis forced himself to sit up. His body screamed in protest, but the connection to the heart was still there, humming in the back of his mind. It was louder now. Urgent. "I can hear it," Lewis whispered. "It is scared. I am angry." He looked at Naira. "Help me up. We have a boss fight to finish." Naira pulled him to his feet. Yarrick stood up, shaking off the last of the neural static. He picked up his rotary cannon, but this time he stood facing the door, leading to the hub. "I owe you a life, Lewis," Jarrett growled. "Let us go collect the debt from Kale." They moved toward the central hub. The resistance in Block 12 had been a skirmish. This was the final assault. The central hub was a sphere of glass and light, suspended in the center of the command spire. Outside, the lumen heart was terrifying, a swirling vortex of angry red and violet expanding rapidly. Director Kale Draven stood at the main console. He looked unruffled, despite the red warning lights bathing the room. "You are persistent," Kale said as the doors blew open. "I will give you that." Lewis, Naira, Jarrett, Kiri, and Lonnie stepped inside. They were battered, bleeding, and exhausted. "It is over, Kale," Lewis said. "Shut it down." "Shut it down," Kale laughed. "We are on the verge of a breakthrough. Look at the energy readings. We are about to achieve infinite sustainability." "You are about to crack the station in half," Lewis shouted. "The heart isn't a battery. It is a living archive. You are torturing it." "Sentimentality," Kale sneered. "Just like your mother." Kale pressed a hand to the console. "Security protocols. Eliminate intruders." Automated turrets dropped from the ceiling. "Take cover," Jarrett roared, flipping a heavy metal desk to create a shield. Bullets hailed against the metal. Jarrett returned fire with his cannon, the noise deafening. Kiri slid behind a server rack, trying to hack the turret controls. "I cannot break his encryption," Kiri yelled. "He has locked the system manually." "Naira, cover me!" Lewis yelled. "Where are you going?" "To the interface." Lewis pointed to the central pedestal where Kale stood. "I have to touch the core. He will kill you before you get halfway there." "Then I guess I have to be fast," Lewis bolted. He ran across the open floor. Bullets chewed up the tiles at his heels. He heard Naira screaming his name, firing her pulse rifle to draw the turret's fire. Kale saw him coming. The Nocturne director drew a sleek energy pistol and aimed. "Goodbye, Mr. Thorne," Kale fired. Lewis didn't dodge. He couldn't. But the shot never hit him. Naira dove in front of him. The energy bolt struck her shoulder, spinning her around. She crashed to the floor. "Naira!" Lewis screamed. He skidded to a halt beside her. Smoke rose from her shoulder armor. She grimaced, clutching the wound. "Go!" she hissed through gritted teeth. "Finish it!" Lewis looked at Kale. The director was aiming again. Lewis turned and lunged for the main console. He didn't try to type a code. He didn't try to bypass the firewall. He slammed his hands onto the raw energy coupling at the base of the interface. "Lonnie, now!" Lewis screamed into his comms. Lonnie, huddled behind the desk, activated the remote amplifier on Lewis's headset. The world turned white. Lewis didn't just connect to the heart. He fell into it. He was no longer in the room. He was everywhere. He was the station. He was the void. He was the memories of 1,000 dead worlds. He felt the pain of the Nakari forests burning. He felt the suffocation of the wolf valleys drowning in ash. He felt the cold despair of his mother as the airlock failed. But he also felt something else. He felt the hope of Block 12. He felt Varg sharing his soup. He felt Lonnie tending to a scraped knee. He felt Naira's hand in his. "We are here," Lewis thought, projecting his voice into the storm. "We are listening," the Lumen Harch answered. It wasn't a roar this time. It was a song. A song of grief, yes, but also of recognition. It recognized Lewis. It recognized the piece of itself that lived in him, his mother's love, his family's sacrifice. "Stop." The command didn't come from Lewis. It came from the heart, amplified through Lewis's voice. The shockwave blasted out from the console. It didn't destroy the room. It passed through the walls, through the hull, into the machinery. Every extraction drill on the station stopped instantly. The hum of the engines died. The lights flickered and steadied. Cale was thrown backward by the force of the psychic blast. He hit the glass wall and slid down unconscious. The automated turrets powered down, their barrels drooping. Silence fell over the central hub. Lewis stood at the console, his hands smoking his breath, coming in ragged gasps. He felt light, hollowed out. He turned slowly. Neera was sitting up, clutching her shoulder. Jarek was lowering his cannon. Kiri and Lonnie were peeking out from behind the server racks. They were alive. Outside the window, the lumen heart had changed. The angry, jagged spikes of violet lightning were gone. It swirled gently now, a soft, pulsating lavender. It looked peaceful. Lewis took a step toward Neera. His legs gave out. He fell, but he didn't hit the floor. Neera caught him. She ignored the pain in her shoulder and pulled him close, burying her face in his neck. "You did it," she whispered. "You crazy human. You did it." Lewis leaned against her, listening to the steady beat of her heart. It was the best sound in the universe. "We did it," Lewis murmured. He looked out at the lumen heart one last time before his eyes closed. He heard the voices fading, settling into a quiet murmur in the back of his mind. "Rest, now," the heart seemed to say. "You are home." The smell of antiseptic in Block 12 was different from the sterile, chemically perfect scent of the upper rings. Here it smelled of crushed mint, synthetic alcohol, and the copper tang of Lupian blood. Lewis woke up to the rhythmic beeping of a repurposed heart monitor. He was not in a hospital bed. He was lying on a plush velvet sofa that had clearly been dragged out of the Nocturne bar down the hall. The common room of cabin B-12-4, and indeed the entire corridor outside, had been transformed into a field triage unit. He tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea pushed him back down. His head felt like it had been split open and restitched with hot wire. "Stay down," a voice commanded gently. Lonnie hovered over him. Her golden fur was stained with soot, and she looked exhausted, her ears drooping slightly. She pressed a cool, damp cloth to his forehead. "Your neural pathways are inflamed," Lonnie said, checking a scanner. "You channeled enough energy to power a destroyer-class starship through your own nervous system. It is a miracle you did not liquefy your frontal lobe." Lewis blinked, trying to focus. "The station, the heart." "Stabilized," Lonnie said. "For now. The feedback loop you created jammed the extraction drills. Everything is offline." Lewis turned his head. The sight that greeted him made his chest ache, not with pain, but with a sudden, overwhelming warmth. The common area was packed. But it wasn't a scene of despair. It was a hive of quiet, desperate solidarity. In the corner, a massive Lupian, one of the mercenaries who had fought against them just hours ago, sat slumped against the wall. A young Nakari girl was carefully bandaging his arm. The wolf did not growl. He looked at the child with a mixture of shame and gratitude. Near the kitchenette, the nocturne singer was using her sonic abilities not to shatter glass, but to hum a low, resonant frequency that seemed to calm the wounded. A human mechanic Lewis recognized from the lower decks was sharing a nutrient pack with a vampire who had lost too much blood. Block 12 had not scattered. They had not run. They had stayed to lick each other's wounds. "Where is Neera?" Lewis asked, his voice rasping. "Patrol," Lonnie said, applying a gel to the burn marks on Lewis's hands. "She and Varg are securing the perimeter. Helix pulled back their troops after the system crash, but they will not stay away for long." "And Jarek," Lonnie pointed to the far wall. The large Lupian warrior was sitting alone on a crate. The neural collar was gone, leaving a raw red ring of chafed skin around his neck. He was staring at his hands, his posture hunched, looking smaller than Lewis had ever seen him. Lewis pushed Laney's hand away gently. "I need to talk to him." "Lewis, you cannot walk straight." "I do not need to walk straight. I just need to walk." With Lonnie's reluctant help, Lewis stood up. The room spun, but he gritted his teeth and shuffled across the floor. The conversations in the room died down as he passed. Eyes followed him, yellow, red, brown. They weren't looking at him like a stray anymore. They were looking at him like he was the only thing standing between them and the void. Lewis sat down on a crate next to Jarek. The wolf flinched, then settled. "You should be resting, little human," Jarek rumbled. His voice was gravel, lacking the mechanical drone of the collar. "You too," Lewis said. "You took a hit from the gravity grid." Jarek let out a short, bitter laugh. "I deserved worse. I tried to kill Naira. I tried to kill you." "That wasn't you," Lewis said firmly. "That was Kale." "Was it?" Jarek looked up, his amber eyes haunted. "The collar controlled my muscles, Lewis. It forced me to pull the trigger. But it did not put me in that uniform. I signed the contract. I took their credits." Jarek gestured vaguely at the wounded mercenaries across the room. "Do you know what Helix calls us? The Peacekeeping Corps. They sent us to a world in the Outer Rim 6 months ago. A forest planet like Silveris. They told us there were insurgents threatening the mining equipment." Jarek's hands clenched into fists. "There were no insurgents, just locals trying to stop the dozers from crushing their ancestral groves. Helix ordered us to clear the obstruction. We burned them out." "I burned them out. I told myself it was security work. I told myself I was just a soldier." He looked at Lewis, tears welling in his predatory eyes. "It is soft genocide, Lewis. They do not build gas chambers. They just destroy the food poison, the water, burn the homes, and wait for the people to fade away. And they use people like me, people who have lost everything, to do it to others." Lewis listened, feeling a cold chill that had nothing to do with his injuries. This was the mechanism of corporate colonialism. It wasn't just about stealing resources. It was about stealing souls. They made the victims into the executioners. "You are not that soldier anymore," Lewis said. He reached out and placed his hand on Jarek's arm, right over the tattoo of his old pack. "You broke the chain. We broke it." Jarek looked at Lewis's hand, then up at his face. "You saw something in the heart, didn't you, when you fried the collar?" "I saw everything," Lewis whispered. "I saw the worlds we lost. And I saw that they are not gone. They are waiting." Before Jarek could respond, the holographic screen on the wall flickered to life. The emergency broadcast signal cut through the low hum of the room. The face of Director Cale Draven appeared. He looked perfectly composed, sitting in his office, as if the command center hadn't been half destroyed hours ago. A band of pristine white bandage wrapped around his forehead was the only sign of the conflict. "Citizens of the Evernight Array," Cale's voice was smooth, dripping with practiced concern. "I speak to you in a moment of grave crisis. 3 hours ago, a terrorist cell operating out of Sector 12 attempted to sabotage the station's primary power core." The room erupted in angry hisses and growls. Lewis stared at the screen, his blood running cold. "This group," Cale continued, a graphic appearing next to him, showing a distorted image of Lewis, Naira, and Jarek, "is led by a radicalized human engineer, Lewis Thorne, who has been manipulating the neural stability of our refugee population. They utilized illegal technology to induce a station-wide blackout, endangering the lives of every family on board." "Liar!" someone shouted from the back of the room. "Helix security has contained the immediate threat," Cale said. "However, due to the severity of the damage to the Lumen Heart's containment field, we are declaring a state of emergency. The Station Council will convene a special tribunal at 0900 hours tomorrow. We will present evidence of this sabotage. Until then, Sector 12 is under quarantine. Any attempt to leave will be met with lethal force." The screen went black. Silence descended on the room. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a trap snapping shut. "He is spinning it," Lonnie said, her voice trembling with rage. "He is turning us into monsters. If the council believes him, they will authorize a purge. They will flush Block 12 into space and call it sanitation." "They control the logs," Lewis said, rubbing his temples. "They have the data. They can edit the footage, tweak the energy readings. They will make it look like I tried to blow up the station." "Then we need better evidence," a voice said from the doorway. Neera stood there. She looked battered. Her armor scorched her arm in a sling. But her eyes were clear. Beside her was Kiri, tapping furiously on her datapad. "Kale thinks he controls the narrative because he owns the cameras," Neera said, stepping into the room. She looked at the faces of the wolf, the vampire, the human, the cat. "But he forgot one thing. He forgot that we are everywhere." Kiri projected a map of the station into the center of the room. It was lit up with hundreds of tiny blue dots. "I have been busy," Kiri grinned, though her smile was sharp. "I tapped into the deep web frequency, the Nocturne Underground, the Lupian salvage networks, the human maintenance unions. Everyone knows something is wrong. They felt the pulse from the heart. They felt the sadness." "Feeling it isn't enough," Lewis said, standing up fully now. The dizziness was gone, replaced by clarity. "We need to prove it. We need to show the Council what Helix is actually doing. Not just here, but on every world they have touched." "How?" Jarek asked. "Our word against theirs." "No," Lewis said. He looked at the star map he had pinned to the wall weeks ago, the one with the red pins. "We don't use our words. We use the heart." He turned to the room. "Kyle called us terrorists. He called us a lost zone. But we are the witnesses. Every person in this room has a story. Every one of you carries a piece of the puzzle that Helix tried to bury." He pointed to the Nocturne singer. You remember the songs of your city before the sunshields went up." He pointed to the old wolf. "You remember the migration paths before the mines were dug." He looked at Lonnie. "You have the medical records. The spike in respiratory failure in the mining colonies. The malnutrition starts." "And I have the server access," Kiri added. "If I can bypass the main firewall during the hearing, I can broadcast whatever we want." "But the Council will not listen to a broadcast," Lonnie argued. "They will say it is faked." "They won't listen to a recording," Lewis agreed. "But they cannot ignore a live stream." He touched his own temple. "The connection, the bridge. I can connect to the heart again. But this time I won't just channel energy. I will channel memory. I will let the heart speak through the station's main display. I will show them exactly what happened to my mother. What happened to all of us." "Lewis," Lonnie stepped forward, gripping his arm. "The last time you did that, you nearly burned out your nervous system. To do it for a prolonged period with high-definition memory transfer, it could kill you. It could erase who you are." "It is the only way," Lewis said. "It is the only witness they cannot bribe." The room was quiet. They understood the cost. Neera walked over to him. She didn't argue. She didn't try to stop him. She just looked at him with an intensity that made the rest of the world fade away. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "I am tired of running, Neera," Lewis said. "I ran from Earth. I ran from my father. I tried to hide in this cabin, but I am done hiding." Neera nodded. She turned to the room. "Block 12, she shouted, her voice ringing with authority. "You heard him. We have 12 hours until the tribunal. I want every scrap of evidence you have. Photos, physical letters, corrupted drives, medical scans. If it proves Helix is lying, I want it." She looked at Jarek. "Gather the wolves. We need a perimeter. If Helix tries to breach before the hearing, we make them pay for every inch." She looked at Kiri. "Get the comms up. We are going to broadcast this to every sector, every ship, every datapad on this station." "And us?" an old Nocturne asked, standing up shakily. "What do we do? You survive," Neera said. and tomorrow you stand with us." The hours that followed were a blur of organized chaos. Cabin B-12-4 ceased to be a home and became a war room. Lonnie and Kiri worked on the neural bridge headset. They stripped it down, reinforcing the copper wiring with high-grade conduits scavenged from Jarek's broken cannon. "We need a buffer," Lonnie muttered, soldering a microchip. "If the emotional surge is too high, it will stop his heart. We need a filter." "I can write a dampening algorithm," Kiri said, her fingers flying. "It will prioritize visual data over sensory pain. It means Lewis will see the memories, but he won't feel the fire. Hopefully." In the corner, Lewis sat with a pile of physical evidence. Old letters from his mother, a charred piece of bark from a Nakari tree, a vial of black water from a Lupian river. He was meditating, holding each object, trying to find its resonance in the vast, humming ocean of the lumen heart that now lived in the back of his mind. It was terrifying. The heart was vast, ancient, and filled with a sorrow so deep it felt like drowning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces. Millions of faces. He felt a hand on his back. "Take a breath," Naira said. She sat down beside him, handing him a mug of steaming tea. It smelled of real herbs, probably stolen from the officer's mess. "I am scared," Lewis admitted, staring into the dark liquid. "What if I get lost in there? What if I forget which memories are mine and which ones are the heart's?" "You won't," Naira said. "How do you know?" "Because we won't let you," she said simply. She took his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. Her claws were retracted, her pads soft. "We are your anchor, Lewis. When you go in deep, you hold on to us. You hold on to this." She squeezed his hand. "Do you remember the first day?" Naira asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "You walked in while I was changing. You looked like a terrified rabbit." "I thought I walked into a zoo." Lewis chuckled weakly. "I thought you were going to eat me." "I considered it," Naira teased. "But then, you put up that map, and you fixed the light, and you saved the module." Her expression grew serious. She leaned in her forehead, resting against his. "You are not a stray anymore, Lewis. You are the alpha of this strange, broken pack. You gave us hope. If you get lost in the dark, I will come in and drag you out. I promise." Lewis closed his eyes, breathing in her scent lavender ozone, and something wild and comforting. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." The morning of the tribunal arrived with a tense, unnatural silence. The station council chamber was located at the very apex of the command spire. It was a circular room with walls of transparent aluminum, offering a panoramic view of the lumen heart. Today, the heart was agitated, swirling with dark veins of crimson. The council members sat on a raised dais, 5 individuals representing the major corporate interests and the nominal government. They looked bored, flipping through holographic files. Director Cale Draven stood at a podium in the center of the room. He wore a crisp black suit, looking every inch the aggrieved victim. "Honorable councilors," Cale began, his voice amplified to fill the chamber. "The evidence is irrefutable. The logs from Sector 12 show a deliberate tampering with the containment field. This was not a protest. This was an assassination attempt on the station itself." He gestured to the large screens floating above the dais. They showed doctored footage of Lewis sabotaging a console, his face twisted in a digital snarl. "We request immediate authorization to purge Sector 12, Cale concluded, "for the safety of the array." "Objection!" a voice rang out. The doors at the back of the chamber hissed open. Lewis walked in. He was wearing his gray jumper, now stained and torn. He wore the modified neural bridge on his head, a mess of wires trailing down to a battery pack strapped to his waist. Behind him walked Naira, Lonnie, Kiri, Jarek, and a delegation of 20 others, wolves, vampires, humans. They were unarmed, but they walked with a synchronicity that was more intimidating than any weapon. "This is highly irregular," the head counselor, a human woman with severe gray hair, snapped. The accused is not permitted to enter with an entourage. We are not an entourage, Jarek rumbled, stepping forward. We are evidence. Security droids moved to intercept, but Kale held up a hand. He smiled, a cold, confident snake. Let them speak, Kale said. Let the boy dig his own grave. Lewis stepped up to the second podium. He looked small compared to the vastness of the room, to the power of the council. He looked at Kale. You talk about safety, Lewis said, his voice shaking slightly, before finding its strength. You talk about progress, but you don't talk about the cost. We are not here for philosophy, Mr. Thorne, the head counselor said. Do you deny the charges? I deny the lie, Lewis said. Helix isn't saving refugees. It is making them. You drain worlds until they die, and then you offer the survivors a bunk on a station built from their stolen energy. It is a cycle, and today it ends. Do you have proof? Kale asked, raising an eyebrow. Real proof, not just sob stories. Yes, Lewis said. I have the only witness that matters. He turned to the council. I am requesting permission to interface with the station's primary display network. I want to show you the logs, not the ones in the computer, the ones in the heart. Preposterous, a counselor scoffed. The anomaly is raw energy. It does not keep logs. It does, Lonnie stepped forward. It is a biomimetic storage field. It records the consciousness of everything it touches, and Lewis can translate it. This is a waste of time, Kale said, turning to the council. He is stalling. I move to let him do it, the head counselor interrupted. She looked at Lewis with curiosity. If it is a trick, we will know. And then we will purge the sector. Lewis nodded. He looked at Naira. She gave him a sharp nod. Kiri, patch me in, Lewis whispered. Kiri tapped her gauntlet. You are live, broadcasting to the council and to the public channels. Lewis reached up and adjusted the headset. He closed his eyes. Don't be afraid. Just remember. He reached out. The connection slammed into him like a freight train. It was heavier than before. The heart was screaming. It was angry at Kale, angry at the machine, angry at the pain. Lewis gritted his teeth, his knees buckling. He felt Lanny's hand on his back injecting a stabilizer. He felt Naira's hand on his shoulder. Show them, Lewis thought. The main screens in the council chamber flickered. The doctored footage of Lewis vanished. Static replaced it. Then color. A forest appeared, towering crystalline trees reaching for a purple sky. It was breathtaking. That is Nakar, Naira whispered, tears streaming down her face. Then the shadows fell. Massive helix machines descended from the sky. They didn't land. They bored into the earth. The trees turned black and crumbled. The animals screamed silently. The viewpoint shifted. It was the memory of a Nakari child watching her home burn. The counselors leaned forward, their eyes wide. The scene shifted. A city of glass spires under a dark moon. The nocturne homeworld. The sun shields were activated, but not to protect. To concentrate the solar radiation. The city melted. Then, Oryx 4. Lewis felt a sharp stab of pain in his heart. This was his memory. No, his mother's memory. The screen showed the inside of a helix lab. Dr. Elena Thorne was arguing with a man. It was a younger Kale Draven. You cannot increase the intake, Kale. Elena's voice rang out clearly in the chamber. The core is unstable. If you push it, the atmosphere will ignite. The timeline is non-negotiable, Doctor. Kale's voice replied, cold and indifferent. Override the safety. Do it. The screen showed Elena typing a command, not to override, but to dump the data into the energy stream. She looked directly at the camera, directly at Lewis. If anyone finds this, she whispered, know that we tried. We tried to stop them. Then the fire took her. The connection severed. Lewis gasped, ripping the headset off. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The council chamber was dead silent. Kale stood frozen at his podium. His face was pale, His composure shattered. He looked at the screen, then at the counselors who were looking at him with a mixture of horror and fury. "That is a fabrication," Kale stammered. "A deep fake. It is verified," the head counselor said, her voice icy. She was looking at a datapad. "The energy signature of that transmission matches the anomaly perfectly. It cannot be forged." She stood up. "Director Draven, you are hereby relieved of command pending a full inquest into Class A crimes against sentient life." "You cannot do this," Kale shouted, backing away. "I am Helix. I am the future." "You are finished," Jarek growled, stepping forward. Two security droids moved, but not toward Lewis. They moved toward Kale. As the droids flanked the disgraced director, Lewis felt a hand pull him up. It was Naira. She didn't say anything. She just held him, her forehead resting against his temple. "We did it," she whispered. Lewis looked out the window. The lumen heart was glowing. It wasn't the angry red of before. It was a soft, pulsating gold. It felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from the universe. The fallout was messy, chaotic, and beautiful. The hearing lasted for 3 days. With the floodgates open, the evidence poured in. Lonnie's medical reports, Kiri's stolen logs, Jarek's testimony. The corporate colonialism of Helix was laid bare for the galaxy to see. It wasn't a total victory. Helix was too big to die overnight. But Kale was in a holding cell, and the Council had suspended all extraction operations indefinitely. More importantly, Block 12 was no longer a secret shame. Lewis stood by the large viewport in the common room of Cabin B-12-4. It had been a week. His head still ached occasionally, a phantom reminder of the connection. But Lonnie said his neural pathways were healing. The room was buzzing. Kiri was teaching a young wolf how to code. Jarek was arm wrestling a vampire and losing much to everyone's amusement. Lonnie was organizing a shipment of real medicine that had just arrived from a relief cruiser. Nira walked up beside him. She handed him a mug of tea, real tea this time paid for with credits that weren't stolen. "You are quiet," she said. "Just thinking," Lewis said. He looked at the reflection of the room in the glass. He saw the mismatch of species, the makeshift furniture, the scars they all carried. "About what?" "About leaving," Lewis said. Nira stiffened slightly. "Leaving. My father sent a message," Lewis said. "He saw the hearing. He wants me to come home. He says he can get me a job at a research institute on Earth. Safe, quiet." Naira didn't look at him. She looked at the stars. And I realized something," Lewis said. He turned to face her. "I realized that I don't know where that is. Where is Earth? No, where home is." He reached out and took her hand. "I looked at the map today, the one with the pins, and I realized I stopped looking at Earth a long time ago. I have been looking here." Nira's ears twitched. A slow smile spread across her face. "So you are staying in the slum with the leaky pipes and the smell of wet fur." "Someone has to keep the lights fixed," Lewis smiled. "And besides, I have a roommate who takes up way too much space on the bed. I need to defend my territory." Nira laughed a sound that was pure joy. She leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't a tentative kiss like the first time. It was a promise. "You are a terrible roommate, Lewis Thorne," she whispered against his lips. "I know," Lewis said, "but I'm learning." Outside, the lumen heart pulsed. It was a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. Lewis looked at the nebula, then back at the chaotic, noisy, wonderful room behind him. He wasn't a nerd who had been transferred to a job anymore. He wasn't a refugee. He was home. "All right," Lewis said, turning back to the room. "Who wants to help me recalibrate the toaster? I think I can make it play music." Kiri cheered from the ceiling. "If it plays jazz, I am breaking it again," Lewis laughed. The sound was foreign to his own ears, light and unburdened. He rolled up his sleeves and walked back into the fray. The war for the future wasn't over. Helix would regroup. The politics would get messy. But for today, for this moment, they had won the right to exist. And that was enough.